Hi there, I'm Amy and welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new here. Today I'm going to be building an abandoned haunted house. I was a little bit torn between a more rundown house when I started coming up with this concept and then having an actual haunted house which had kind of nice furnishings but was had a little bit of wear and tear around. And partway through the build, when I was furnishing, I sort of thought, okay, this looks a bit too nice at this point to be run down, so maybe I should just make it more of a haunted house. So I did go ahead and do that. While I was looking up some reference pictures for Romanian architecture, I did find that a lot of them had this kind of roof style where the new frieze that we got in the Life and Death expansion pack actually extended quite far out, and then the roof sat just on top of it. So I kind of tried to mimic that. If you weren't aware, that frieze actually comes out by an entire grid square in the game, and so I just took away the overhang from all of the roofs and sat it on top of that. And I think it looks really good actually, so I enjoyed being able to do something a little bit different with the roof in that way. I also made sure to use a lot of the new Life and Death roof assets, so all of these little holes in the top of the roof. They are a little bit animated in game as well. You can't see what's below them, but you can it looks like you can see into the house. So that's quite a lot of fun. I really like those, and it's the first time I've actually got around to using them. Also, speaking of the freezers, I did end up having some glitches with those while I was building. Who's surprised, really? There's always issues with those things in the game, to be honest. But if you do see a few of them being out of place, don't worry, I did end up editing that before I uploaded this to the Sims 4 gallery. So if you did want to download this build at all, you can grab it from there just using my EA ID, which is AWayfaringFrog. It's also under the hashtag AWayfaringFrog as usual, and all the details of that are in the description down below. At this stage in the build, I was fiddling around with the stairs quite a bit. The new ones that came with the expansion pack sadly don't have a matching floor tile, but they also don't seem to match with the wallpaper, which is in a similar style to them. So I was kind of struggling to deal with that. But I figured it out in the end and found one that was close enough. And then the windows and doors on the front of the house became a bit of a pain for me. I really wanted to be able to access this balcony area, but everything just looked a bit too samey on the top floor in the way that I'd used the arched door. But I also like the idea of having windows on the front of the house, so honestly, I do end up getting there in the end, as you'll see a bit later when I switch everything out and those doors entirely go away. I end up opting for the more grand one that's got the stone surrounding it, and then I use the skull one on the top floor. The only thing is that skull one doesn't have any kind of rundown swatches, but I just picked one that matched with the rest of the build. Otherwise, a lot of the windows do have the broken swatch to them, which I thought was quite a lot of fun, since the idea was this haunted house had maybe been left for a while and no one wants to come in and renovate it or live in it because of all the haunted little ghosts inside it. That does also mean that I used the lot trait from Paranormal. Oh, it's not a lot trait, sorry, it's a type of build, so it is a haunted house on the gallery, but if you don't have the Paranormal stuff pack, there's only a couple of items in here from that pack, and then you could just use it as a normal residential property if you wanted. Just working on the floor plan now, it came together quite simply. It is only a one-bedroom house, but the bottom floor has quite a decent amount of space, including a little office at the back. I originally thought I was going to make this into a bathroom, so I start by putting tiling in there to indicate that, but I do decide that since it's only one bedroom, it makes sense to just have the one bathroom, so I thought I'd make it a bit more of a useful space and created an office instead. Plus, with the new ability to be able to write horror stories in The Sims 4 with this Life and Death expansion pack, it seemed like a fun idea to maybe have a sim who has the thanatology skill and is able to write horror stories, so that could be where they work. I was really excited to be able to use these new kind of greenhouse windows as well that come in the pack. I did end up going for, again, the rundown swatch, and there's a couple for that. I mean, the windows in general are run down, which is kind of a shame. I'd quite like to have a cleaner swatch, but then they also have the broken one, so I mismatched those across the space. This build is also in the Morning Vale part of town, so that's why the lighting looks a little bit odd here. It's more designed to be for ghosts who want to live here. I guess it's going for a bit of an afterlife vibe, which is quite fun, and it's, again, the first time I've been building in this particular area of the new world. There's quite a lot of firsts for me in this build, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to have a go at it. But now I just about decided where I want all of the windows. A couple of them end up scooching around while I furnish a bit later, but I'm now going to be working on landscaping. And I wanted to create more of a graveyard space in the back garden, since again that's something that I haven't got around to doing yet. And I wanted to use this new fence that came in the pack. Unfortunately, the new gate that goes with that fence was one tile too wide to be able to be centered on this lot, so I did end up just leaving the fence open because I didn't want to have to extend the size of my house at all just to fit that in. But that was a real shame. I'm still really hoping that the Sims team send out an update one day to allow you to custom place gates on fences, a bit like they did with windows and doors a lot earlier on. It's just so frustrating that you can't do that. It seems... I don't see why you shouldn't be able to, given that you can with doors and windows, so I really am looking forward to if they ever decide to update that. For the landscaping, I used some of these really bright plants that were around the world. So that big white tree is from Debug, those kind of purpley bushes are also from Debug. I got out the blue low-lying flowers a bit later as well and added those in. And I thought they were really fun. I've never really made any kind of landscaping with that sort of plant before. I think the only other world that has similarly vibrant plants is probably Sixum from the Get to Work expansion pack. So I did do a build for that a while ago. But otherwise, these ones were very different to what I usually use for landscaping and was quite a lot of fun to try out. But into the back garden, I was a bit determined to try and use that swing set at first because sometimes it will just swing by itself, which is really spooky and fun and felt like it fit the vibe of this lot, but unfortunately I just couldn't find a good place for it. And I've used it a couple of times now, so I thought I'd skip it this time. And instead just opted for having some of these new plots on the ground and added a few headstones onto them, as well as adding in the new crypt. And you can actually explore that one like the ones around in the world as well, so it's quite useful for gameplay in that respect as well. Your Sims can actually also woohoo in the crypt, so if you really wanted to, there's another woohoo spot in the house for you. I also had a bit of a weird issue with terrain paint while I was building this. So at this point I'd already added into the build just that little strip of terrain paint, that's the walkway to the front door from the pavement, and then very shortly I'll be adding kind of a windy path to go around to the crypt and the stairway at the back of the build. I also added in the usual kind of darker terrain under the plant areas just to add a bit of dimension to it, although this lot in just as default does have quite a lot of dimension to the grass. It's very patterned, which was quite nice. What was really weird though is I took a break between finishing the outside and then starting furnishing, and when I came back to furnish, the terrain paint disappeared, but only the windy path onwards. The bit at the front stayed put, and I've never had that before. Usually it will change to a different kind of terrain paint or it will all disappear entirely, but I've never had some of it stay and some of it disappear before. So that was really weird. I don't know if anyone else has ever had an issue with that, so if you have, let me know in the comments down below. I'd be curious if it's a new bug or if it's just another variation of the existing one that we've been suffering with for ages at this point. But now jumping back onto the build, this is where after I'd just taken a break and I just added in a few lights on the outside. The terrain paint might look a little bit different as a result as well, because like I said, that did disappear, so I had to redraw that on. I really love the lights that come in the new expansion pack as well though. I made sure to add those in quite a few places. I think they're so pretty. The ones that I added on the floor around some of the planter areas and just on the end of the little fences of the stairs, that was base game though, but the ones on the walls are all from the new pack. I think I'm going to see myself using those a lot in the future. They're just really pretty and they come in a lot of really useful swatches, so they're very versatile. But now we are onto furnishing, and as you can see I went for a very green colour scheme. I have already done that in a different build on the channel, which was more of a starter home, but I just really love this swatch, so I couldn't resist using it again. I did try and combine it with a few more colours this time around though, and in the kitchen I ended up opting for these vampire countertops rather than the new ones. I thought they were really pretty and matched nicely with the new assets, and I don't think I've ever really used this swatch before because the countertop being a bit creamier, I often find difficult to incorporate into builds just because I might have a lot of white accents and the cream is a bit too much against the white in that sense. But I think it looked really good in this build. To make the fridge section look a bit more built-in as well, I did end up lowering the cabinets just by 1 block, so they're not quite at the same height as the cabinets over where the sink is. I don't think it's very obvious, so hopefully it's okay, and sorry if I just pointed out something that you're now not going to be able to unsee, but I really wanted to make it look more built-in. I wish some of the fridges in the game were a bit shorter so that you could put the cabinets up at the top of them. It's a bit unfortunate that the general height that the cabinets usually look best at isn't quite right for most of the fridges in the game. The fridges are just often way too tall, but the Sims team have been adding in a lot more lately that have a more built-in effect, like with Home Chef Hustle and even this expansion pack. The fridge fits in really nicely with the cabinets, so very thankful for that. I hope they keep doing that in the future. This kitchen area is fairly simple though. I just added in a few additional appliances, including this coffee maker from the Cosy Bistro kit, as well as a little base game microwave in the corner. A lot of decorations from the cottage living expansion pack also looked really cute, so I went through and added a lot of those into the space as well. When I playtested this build as well after I'd finished recording, I think it's the first build ever where I've managed to not have to move anything around. So everything was functional off the bat. It's always nice when it's slightly less work for me to have to scoot things around. But now moving on into the front little hallway area, I ended up doing quite a little simple room here. There's not much space to be able to put much anyway. So I just added a little round table with a plant on top. Good old classic rich house. I feel like a lot of expensive looking houses often have a table like this, just with a little plant. I am a bit bothered by the swatches on that item though, and I feel like this with a lot of items from the game. As much as I love having more neutral swatches like a plain white or a plain black, I do feel like they're very monotone, and it would be nice to have a little bit of variation. I think I've mentioned this before in another video where I find that all of the bed swatches in particular, whenever the Sims team add like a basic black or a basic white, instead of having black sheets and then a wooden frame, just literally everything's black, and it just feels way too stylized. It's almost like it's not a very usable swatch anymore because just everything's one color, and I don't think it's very common to find things like that. And I definitely feel like that with that little plant that I put in the hallway. But now into the dining room. This is also a bit of a simple room. I did have a go at sizing down this new curtain item, which is actually a wall decoration in the game. The only thing is it has a bit of a weird shadow on the top of it if you size it down. So even though the window is quite small on the side of the building, I opted to just have the full frame instead, and I think it still looks good. I also chose to combine the new dining chairs with this table from Horse Ranch. The Horse Ranch items often have a bit of wear and tear to them, which I think is really fun, so I tried to incorporate that where it seemed like it worked well in the spaces. I also feel like we don't have that many round tables in the game, so when Horse Ranch came out, this was one of my favourite items just because it's got so many really good wood swatches. So it was nice to be able to bring that in again. And again, because the Life and Death expansion pack focuses a lot more on more modern aesthetics, I wanted to make this a little bit more classic. So it was good to be able to use quite a few other packs for that. But jumping into the living room now, I ended up using the sofas from the Cottage Living expansion pack because I thought the colours of those worked quite nicely with the rug I picked out. While I was picking out the rug as well, I still haven't actually got around to reinstalling Twisted Mexie's tool mod, which is one of my favourite mods, especially for resizing rugs. But thanks to having 2 sizes of the rectangular rug in the new pack, I can usually find the size that I need, as the biggest size actually scales down using the normal cheats in game to a decent size as well. It's a little bit bigger than the smallest one out of the 2. So I did end up doing that here. I swear as well that the ability to size or scale items in game is no longer a cheat, because one day while I was building I forgot to put in the move objects cheat off the bat and it would still let me scale items, which was a bit of a surprise. So unless I was just being silly, it looks like you don't need that cheat to be able to scale items anymore. Next to the stairs, I ended up creating a bit of a reading nook here. As I mentioned, in the room just to the right of where we're building at the moment, I did end up creating a little office space, but I thought this reading nook would be quite cute. And again, it was another way for me to get in that little gramophone, which I still really love. I think it's such a fun item, and it looks so much nicer than the base game gramophone. Plus, you can summon the Grim Reaper with the gramophone, so I feel like it's useful for so many more reasons, especially because, as I mentioned, I'm building in the more ghostly area of Ravenwood, and so being able to summon the Grim Reaper seems like something a ghost might want to do. But just cluttering up this little side unit from Crystal Creations, I end up using this red shelf, which is a piece of custom content. But if you don't have custom content in your game at all, you can still download this build since it's not in the build when I upload it to the gallery. It just basically lets me move objects to specific heights. You can do that with shelves within the actual game itself. I think the ones from Dream Home Decorator are really useful for that, but this one lets you lower it further into the floor than you would be able to with the other ones. So I find it really useful for that. And if you just raise items up manually in-game, sometimes they'll be at the wrong height. So I do really like having that mod in-game. If you wanted the link to that at all, I do have a list of the mods that I have in my game, or usually have in my game, just in the description of the video, so you can check that out there. Into the little office area, I just used this little single tile desk from the Werewolves pack. I thought it was quite cute and very kind of old style themed, and then I just used a few of the bookshelves from the new pack. And it was at this stage as well that I thought it might be fun to add in some cobwebs across the rest of the build and a few cracks here and there, so I just popped around the other rooms and included those. The cracks and the cobwebs are both from vampires, but then the little worn out areas on the wallpapers that I've been adding in are from the Life and Death expansion pack. We've got so many more items like that than we used to have, and it's really fun to be able to make more rundown builds. And again, I used the roof item that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, which lets you kind of see almost into the build as if there's a hole in the roof. I added one of those into the floor of the living room. It is still fine for your Sims to walk on, I noticed while I was playtesting. I sort of expected it to not let your Sims walk near it, but it's perfectly functional, so there's no issue in that regard, and I thought it was a bit of fun to make it look like the floor was falling in a bit. But now upstairs into the hallway space, there wasn't a lot of room here, so I just added a few pieces of furniture in, including one of these memorial displays. And then I used that red shelf, so that custom content again, just to clutter up this little shelving unit from the new Life and Death pack. That unit actually is a bit annoying to me because it's got very few slots to be able to put items within it. So that's why I usually end up having to custom place each item on it. I do like it when the Sims team leave shelving units quite blank to allow us to more custom place our own clutter on them, but when there's zero clutter on a shelving piece already, I do feel like there should be more slots on it because you can barely fit anything otherwise. But just in this hallway space as well, because this is a haunted house with the paranormal stuff pack, I added in a seance table. I do wish there were more swatches of that though. I thought it looked a little bit odd being in this house. I think the black one looked the best, but the bright yellow that's on every single one of the swatches, as much as I love the colour yellow, it's too much, and I wish there were some more subtle versions of it. But from a gameplay perspective, it seemed too useful, so I really wanted to make sure to include it. And then in the only bathroom in the house, I used quite a bit of vampires in here. I didn't end up going for the toilet though. I forgot actually while I was building this that there was even a toilet from vampires, so I just used this base game one, but I did end up adding a bit more clutter above it on that little shelf, so I probably wouldn't have done that if I'd used the vampires one. But I think the vampires one might be cheaper, so if you did want your Sims to move into this build, you could always switch it out. It is already quite an expensive build. That is all in the description down below, the details of how many rooms and things that this build has. So you would probably need to use cheats if you wanted to move into it. And then into the bedroom, I was trying to stay away from the new beds because I've been using them quite a lot in my building so far. So I opted for this one from base game, which I think paired really well with this wallpaper. I just love the new bed so much, and I'm trying so hard to not be really repetitive in my building. So hopefully you agree. If you are enjoying this speed build as well, be sure to hit that like button. It really does help out the channel, and subscribe if you haven't already so you know when I next upload a speed build. And I'd love to hear your thoughts of what you think of this particular build in the comments down below, so do let me know. The furniture in this bedroom otherwise is fairly simple. I did try and bring in a lot more of that kind of deep reddy pink that's in that wallpaper again, so I used the Space Game rug, which I thought looked really nice, and it wasn't too patterned, so I don't think it clashed at all with the wallpaper or the bedding. And then I added in the side tables from university. The dresser is actually from Cats and Dogs, and then the kind of tall unit in the corner next to the door is another one from Horse Ranch. It just seemed like a nice little space to add a bit more storage for your Sims to make the house seem a little bit more realistic. I also thought the chair that I popped into the corner next to the dresser matched really well with this base game bed. The chair's actually from university, and I don't think I've ever used it before, so again, it was quite nice to be able to find something that I haven't built with before and include it into here. The lamp as well matches that. I believe that was also from university, but I put that in more of a dark grey swatch rather than the white. But at this stage we are coming to the end of the speed build portion of the video, so if you have been enjoying it, please do hit that like button and let me know what you think. And if you've got any ideas for builds you'd like to see in the future, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. I love hearing your feedback or things that you'd like to see on the channel. I do always take those into consideration when I'm thinking of what to build next in The Sims 4. I have also started a bit of a gameplay series of the Life and Death expansion pack, so if that piques your interest, be sure to check that out on the channel. But otherwise, I really hope you have a great rest of your day, and thanks so much for tuning in. Bye now!